Hey everyone, welcome to a live stream with Naturally with Karen. I'm Karen, and I put together this live stream today because I was reminded by the occasions when I've eaten some of the foods that I generally do not recommend, and I get the hands and feet that might fall asleep or like weakness in my muscles. This particular live stream I decided to put together with a little bit of an emphasis on an old Grimm's fairy tale known as Sleeping Beauty. Now, if you're a baby boomer, and I'm on the very bottom end of a baby boomer, if you're a baby boomer, then you know exactly about the Grimm's fairy tale Sleeping Beauty. It's a super, super snowy day here today. I want to welcome you. It's blowing and blizzardy, and I had some errands to do, early today. And I just swept all my hair back and kind of put my collar scarf around here to protect my neck a little bit. Now, I did massage for 16 years, and I cut that back to where I just do a couple of clients, per strong or per week now. But in those 16 years, I learned a phenomenal amount of information that I just know is going to help you. So let's get started on this live stream. Sleeping Beauty, if you don't know, is a Grimm's fairy tale, and Sleeping Beauty is one of them that preceded the 1812 publication of Grimm's fairy tales. And it had to do with guests that came to see a little girl who was born just, beneficent with everything. She was born to a king. She had money. She had servants. She was so beautiful. And the people that loved her, her family, wanted to protect her. This is really symbolic for me of every little girl and every little boy. And this story for me brings about how much we want to be able to protect them. So in the story of Sleeping Beauty, we want, oh, bless up, Judy. Good to see you. Hi there. We want to protect our young children. Now, in the story, the older version of the story, 11 guests came, the 12th guest came. So that kind of represents the 12 houses of the astrological zodiac, not getting too esoteric here. But the 13th guest was actually the queen, and she was very, very jealous of Sleeping Beauty. And she made a prophecy that said that when she turned 15 years old, she was going to prick her finger on a spindle. And when that happened, she was going to fall into a really, really deep sleep. And, now the queen was going to be able to be the most beautiful in the whole kingdom, the most powerful, instead of this princess that was born to the king. Now, most people that have little girls often will refer to their little girls as being a beautiful princess. When we have little boys, they often, put on a superhero cape and they fly around. We want our children to have powerful, protected, young childhood, infant, toddler, and young childhood experiences. But let's face it, one of the things I'm going to be talking about today is the fact that you're not going to be quite so protected if you're going to be blown around by some of the hype that I'm going to show you on some of the posters I picked up at a family medicine clinic, this morning, as you'd call it, or I like to say this rise. So neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy is something that when I first started doing massage, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, this is such a really weighty diagnosis. How can I possibly help someone with peripheral, meaning the hands, the feet, the lower legs, neuropathy? And, I was in my 40s, my early 40s, when I opened up my business in Minnesota, September the 1st of 2003, became licensed and insured, doing wellness consultations and massage therapy, energy work, helping people to heal and find out what would really work for them. I had some gentlemen that worked for U.S. Steel and other companies, industrial companies, where they were on their feet all the time. And they would tell me, I really want to come in and get a great massage. Do you have any experience with neuropathy? I thought, oh my gosh, how intimidating. What am I going to do for them? And I just did my best, and I figured it out because I didn't really have any preparation for that. So I'm telling you that I was absolutely green. I didn't have any idea. Now, years went by where I did actually spend that time working with clients that had peripheral, hands, feet, lower legs, neuropathy. And they had a diagnosis. You could see the discoloration in the lower legs. You could see where as the legs got lower and lower and you got closer to the ankle, you would start to see a deeper purpley red kind of a color on some clients who'd had neuropathy for many years. Now, what does that really mean? Well, notwithstanding an actual mechanical issue like a spinal cord traumatization or injury, a birth defect of some sort. Bless up, Marky. Good to see you. Clients would come in with this peripheral neuropathy and tell me they had diabetes type 2, to which I would say, in California, here I was 42, in California, I was helping people quite easily reverse type 2 diabetes. It really had to do with making a lot of dietary changes, detoxification, and taking a look at your trace elements, which I'm going to get into. So people with neuropathy, they had oftentimes in the beginning, they'd have tingling in their hands and feet. And just about anyone, especially even as a child, you can probably remember that sometimes you'd wake up and your whole hand would be asleep and you'd kind of shake it and you'd kind of wait for the pins and needles feeling to go away. I remember that. And in fact, I had it with my feet last night. I had taken a couple of young men, my son and a friend, with me to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, for just a daytime road trip. It's about 3 hours away. And we went to get some good food. We had some things I don't normally eat. And just the congestion of it. What's up, Marky? Good to see you. Give thanks for the love. Just the congestion of eating. In my case, I like to go to Hooks over on Dale and University and get the fried okra. Now, I don't normally enjoy fried foods, but I love some fried okra. And I also had a few other things. I was looking for African food, which I'm really fond of, like African sambusa or samosas, however you may call them. And so I go over to Sun Foods and I was able to, they didn't have samosas today, but I was able to get some other African food that was really spicy and really delicious. And we enjoyed that. We had some fried sweet potato and plantain and different things. And we just thought, oh, how wonderful this is to be somewhere that has this wonderful, great African and Asian food that we can enjoy. So when I got up early, even though I hadn't gotten much sleep again, I had these pins and needles feeling in my feet. And, your foot kind of feels like it's flopping over a little bit. And I realized, man, I haven't had that in years and years. So it indicates to me that my energy is getting compromised. I'm getting close to degenerating myself, maybe through some stress, not sleeping, which I've been under a little bit. And then also the food, the fried foods, right? So we want to eat more fresh and more raw, which is why I showed you on my page today, on the Naturally with Karen Facebook page, a little synopsis of my cash register receipt for organic broccoli, cauliflower, a cantaloupe, some cucumbers, and things like that for less than $35. Now, I made myself a little list here that I wanted to make sure that I covered. So tingling hands and feet, the feeling of them just kind of feeling like they're falling asleep. But it's not just that your hands and feet are falling asleep. It's also that the brain is also suffering. Now, you reach full myelination, which means, as I've explained to many of my clients over all these years of thousands of hours a year doing this work, if I put my tractor outside with the blizzard that's outside my window right now, give thanks for the love, and it didn't have coating on the wires, and they took the key to the tractor and they went to start it, the tractor probably wouldn't start. This is a story that I actually told Mr. Hongisto, who's a friend and someone who had a business here multiple generations where I live. That tractor wouldn't start, and the reason is because it would start to get oxidized. Now, from ages 0, from the time you are birthed out of mama, until you're about, not magically, exactly, but about age 2, you have to have just the right amount of trace elements, nutritional elements, trace elements like copper and zinc, to be able to myelinate your whole system. So when my clients came in, I started finding ways to break it down really, really simply. You don't have to suffer from peripheral, this is not me, peripheral, meaning your hands, your feet, your lower legs, neuropathy, meaning what? A condition related to your nerves. So when you see that discoloration where it's red and purple, and it looks very obviously different on your skin, especially if you're in a white skin bag, and you're going to see this real discoloration in the legs. That has everything to do with compromised blood flow. And compromised blood flow has everything to do with your daily habits, like the food that you eat. If you're out walking, are you standing for long periods of time and then you're eating a lot of high trans fat, the fried foods like I had yesterday? That is definitely going to produce glandular issues like thyroid, organ issues like your filter, your liver, right? So here's some of the other things. I'm going to put on my glasses and kind of read to you. So people were having issues because they were diabetic type 2. I needed to increase their circulation or their blood flow. So when they would come for massage, I would manually create better circulation for them and blood flow. Medications that change the body, okay? Medications that take down some of the trace elements that you need. Deficiencies like anemia would also produce that falling asleep, tingling hands and feet, restless legs. So anemia, deficits in iron, zinc, and copper. So that's why I'm going to show you the hair test here in a couple of moments that I just got in the mail yesterday. Okay. Deficiencies, right? So kidney issues, not being able to filter correctly because your trace elements are, out of balance, and because you're not getting enough water, because your daily habits, you're not moving around a lot. So your circuitry, your filtration, alcohol and drug issues. Well, opioids, for one, create an opioid-induced endocrinopathy, which means that they really, really tamper with your endocrine system. So everything about your chemical hormone messengers, okay? Alcohol is going to tamper with your liver. Even if you're like a 1 glass of wine per night person, all the way up to someone who really has a much more severe level alcoholism, it's going to really start to destroy your nutritional elements and take them out of balance. So you're going to be much more prone to having the tingling hands and feet, the restless legs. I took an entire course from Matt Finch called The Ultimate Opioid Detox 2.0. And in it, Matt talks about clinical as well as natural holistic ways to rid yourself of being addicted to opioids, opiates, and all of the analogs that are out on the market, like fentanyl, and like some of the pressed pills that are coming through the deep and the dark web. Okay? So Matt knew that you would start to have a lot of endocrine or hormonal glandular issues if you were going to use opioids for a long time. And the same thing could be true, not so much, but it's true as well with people that are addicted to benzos, okay, like Xanax. Now, infections in the body. Why do we get infections in the first place? Well, we get infections because our body doesn't have enough zinc or copper that's going to be able to help us take them down. You know that you might be prone to go to the natural food store and go get yourself some zinc lozenges, or put some of the droppers, like I do, into your water bottle and make sure you get enough zinc. Infections are going to happen when your trace elements are off. That's why we used to use iodine on our cuts and scrapes and infections long ago, okay? Well, what about too, if people start to get nerve damage or nerve irritation known as carpal tunnel syndrome? Now, in the early 1980s, I had carpal tunnel, and I went to a friend of mine who's a neurologist in San Jose, California, and I asked him, what will I do about this? Because I didn't know at the time. And he did what was called a nerve conduction velocity test. I bet a lot of you actually really know what that is, but it's where they actually shock the nerve to see whether or not, you're going to have a response that is in the predictable range or not. That's kind of a real short and sweet about what an NCV is, which is a nerve conduction velocity. That sounds really super important, but it means they gave you a shock, which actually kind of hurts. And they measured the velocity, the speed of which you reacted to it. If the speed of which you reacted to that sharp shock was very slow, then that meant the message within the carpal tunnel, the bones here in the wrist, and the median nerve or the ulnar nerve, so they would know based on which one of your fingers were starting to go numb more often, right? So I decided even back then that I didn't want to get the incision in my wrist, and I started doing exercises and going to yoga and figuring out that I entirely healed myself, and then I did massage for 16 years after that. So I think that's a pretty strong guarantee that you can heal yourself, okay? Now, if you had some trauma and you crushed some of the, the carpal bones, and that really impinged upon your nerve, I can see that might be something different. Bless up, Kim. Good to see you, sis. Okay. So the nerve conduction velocity test would check to see how fast, how quickly you would respond to the issues of your nerves being compromised in the carpal tunnel, in between here, in the bridge. Okay. Trace elements, are you able to fully myelinate yourself based on having sufficient nutritional elements in your body? Now, this is pretty important because more and more people, especially between the ages of 20 and 40, are being diagnosed all the time with multiple sclerosis. If you're sclerosing, what does that mean? Doesn't it sound really super ominous to be diagnosed with MS? Give me a thumbs up. Does that sound like a big deal if you were diagnosed with MS? It'd be a big deal to me. But what it really means is that you aren't able to maintain your myelination, M-Y-E-L-I-N, your myelin, that has to coat your whole nervous system so that the impulses can be sent and messages can be between the brain and the body, and all of your nerves can work as they're supposed to. Now, your food and your daily habits has everything to do with this. And I also would like to look, if we're doing coaching, what's going on with your mom? What's going on with dad, if you know, okay? So that I can put together a very thorough way of seeing exactly what's happening from the root, okay? So now, the fairy tales that were all written by the Grimm's brothers, and they were pretty horrific for a long time. They had a lot to do with very grim, gruesome stories that they told us about how people were basically being, predatorily stalked and abused and perhaps eaten and pricked with spindles. But there was a lot of allegory. There was a lot of hidden suppositions and meanings within these fairy tales. In fact, they weren't really written by the Grimm's brothers. They were written by the women that they married, that both those women were working in, because there was many, many Grimm's children. There was about, I think, 13 Grimm's children or more. And they married two women, if I remember the story correctly from many years ago, that were working in a library. And those women ended up writing, and then these stories were rewritten, much as another book that I love so much, the Bible. Okay. And I went through a time in my life when I was quite a bit younger where I didn't like the Bible at all. But if you can find the good stories that are in there and really read them with a deep understanding, an overstanding, then you're able to see what was actually being shared with you. Kind of like the book of Genesis, right? When they talked about, I can't read it, hon. Every herb and every fruit and herb bearing seed. I'm not going to answer right now, babe. Okay. So when it comes to Sleeping Beauty, and again, I'm going to repeat this because you might have missed it when I first started. She was born to a very famous king, is how the story goes. And she was beautiful. She had all the money. She was a perfect, for all intents and purposes, the storyteller, a perfect little girl who really was very protected. No one wanted anything to happen, nor do you, to your little girl. But as she had a birthday, and the 11th, listen to the nuggets, the 11th guest came. The 12th guest came and 11 gifts were given. The 12th guest came and she completed the gift receiving. So that's like going through the 12 houses astrologically. That's why I'm saying you need to decipher deeper into what was known and what's really being given. The 13th guest was what I would like to call Cold Mother. Cold Mother is Lake Superior. Cold Mother are the waters around Iceland where the iodine levels are dangerously high. We don't want to eat the molecular iodine coming from the seaweed in Iceland, but we do in the Atlantic where it's moderate. We might in the Pacific where it's on the lower end, okay? Perhaps we might have years ago in the warmer waters around Hawaii and closer to the equator. The queen that was the 13th guest, meaning after the house, particularly of the passing or the death, right? The 13th guest, the queen, or in my mind, Cold Mother, who's been created through these fairy tales and through the systems and through losing the protection that we would normally have with our young children and ourselves as young children. She said on her 15th birthday, what's a 1 and a 5? On her 15th birthday, I like to give you a little bit so you can kind of go on a little bit of a, use the breadcrumbs to find what you need to do, like Hansel and Gretel. She would prick her finger on a spindle. So her father, the king, set about to make sure that every spinning spindle in the kingdom was done away with, right? So it came to be that Sleeping Beauty, the young girl, ended up pricking her finger, right? So take a look at the pricking of the finger, compare it with the rose. And then I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about something. If your hands and feet are getting tingly, if they've been tingly for a long time and you're standing at your job and you end up with diabetic peripheral neuropathy, it sounds really important, but you've looked at people before, you've observed them with love, and you've seen that near the bottoms of their legs, as you go down towards the feet, you see the reddish, purplish, or the spots. You see the discolorations. That's lack of blood flow. Why would we have lack of blood flow? For the same reason that we have congestive sleep apnea. For the same reason that we have babies that are absent a mechanical defect like tongue ties and so forth, that are mouth breathers. Okay? So now, before I get going, because I think that the Sleeping Beauty really has a lot to do with protection, I want to show you something here. I was at a family medicine clinic early with a family member today, and these are some of the flyers that I picked up, okay, that were available for people to take. And so I want you to notice, okay, this one is targeted at adults 50 plus. The flu can be a real danger, okay? 6 million adults that are 50 plus. I'm going to be 58 this summer, okay? So don't delay, get your vaccines today. Okay? Let's go to the next one, because I think what's going on here in this fluency campaign, you see the top over here where it says, the fluency right up here, the fluency campaign, right? Now this one says people 65 years of age and older are at a greater risk of serious complications from the flu. On average, more than 126,000 are being hospitalized. An estimated 21,000 seniors, okay, die of flu-related, and an estimated 90% of flu deaths, right, occur in people that are 65 years of age and older. Talk to your healthcare provider today. The message is very loud and strong. Get the flu shot. Now, if you've listened to any of my videos, I personally am not for the flu shot. And that is because I don't want to see children, adults, or seniors, so to speak, suffering from a mercury byproduct known as thimerosal, thimersol, aluminum salts, which is absolutely why you have tremors unless it's medication, which is also compounded with coal tar, sulfur. You really need to look them up. Even some of the pain medications have propylene glycol inside of them, which I would never want to swallow, me on a personal level, okay? So I'm going to need you to wait till I'm done here, babe. This one I have, okay? When it comes to the flu, your child is at risk. 171 flu-related pediatric deaths. 75% of children who died from the flu had not been vaccinated. 56% of children who died from the flu were otherwise healthy. 33,000 children were hospitalized. Now, on my Facebook page, I have a friend who we speak quite often, who works inside of a clinical setting in a hospital. And she said that they had a particular word like a frequent flyer because people were coming in with these flu symptoms. But I feel absolutely certain, as I learned in herbal school in the year 2000 in Santa Cruz at American School of Herbalism, that a cold is a cleansing opportunity. You are detoxifying because you may have never been taught that you needed to do that. You may have never been taught that while you were eating cheese and dairy products, like when I left the holiday convenience store yesterday and I gassed up the car to go to the Twin Cities, a man was hoisting up 2 big gallons of cow milk. And I said in the nicest possible tone, "Are you planning to go home and do you have baby cows?" And he said, "I don't know if you find this funny or you find it harassment, but I didn't mean it to be harassment. I really mean it to be education. And I'm looking for alternative ways to reach people." And he said, "No, I've got little ones at home." And I said, "Little cows or little humans? Because if you have little humans at home, I would love to give you 5 minutes of my time and explain about how you can take a blender, some water, and some hemp seeds and make them the finest milk on the planet." Okay, so here is the flyer about children, okay? And then the last thing that I'm going to show you is, with no offense to anyone who gets their hair test, because trust me, I've had my own in 2017 and years before that, but I've got the person's name blanked off. And this person whose test I just received, yesterday, the hard copy, she already got her email results, is a fairly young person. And you're going to see when I show you the health trends, just like when you get your own at naturallywithkaren.com and you click on lab testing on the top and it says hair testing or blood testing. You can also get on-demand blood testing where, like for myself, I wanted a pregnenolone test, which is a female hormone that determines my ovarian function because I was diagnosed with ovarian carcinoma in 2008. And I cured, I'm going to say because it's me, I cured that and proved 100% it was cured and had tissue testing. But before I had my one and only surgery in my life, I asked for a pregnenolone test, and I've probably asked for a total of 5 blood tests in my 57 years of life. You can see that I never go to the doctor. I was raised very differently from a young girl in the early 60s. But I asked Dr. Widstrom at Essentia Healthcare, who's a gynecologist, who I had selected after interviewing 5 gynecologists that all told me I was absolutely freaking nuts to have gone almost 2 years with advanced ovarian carcinoma diagnosis with a CA-125, cancer antigen 125 blood test, which is standard today to show that there's an elevation of inflammation in the body. But being as how I was a paralegal, I did all the research. and I located what were the 31 causative factors that would elevate that test. And then I went to work, which is the same thing I'm going to do for you with coaching. Not to make doctors feel like they're idiots or disrespect them, not in any way. In fact, on an ideal level, I want to be able to partner with your doctor or your whole team and be able to do the best for you on the pieces you can do for yourself. So let's take a look before we close on what her test showed her. Now, you might know what atherosclerosis is, but it has to do with narrowing and hardening of your arteries. That's a pretty big deal for someone who's very young, okay? Bradycardia means that your system is going too slow. You're in a slow metabolic type, and she was indicated as slow metabolic. She has calculus on a moderate level, which means she's brewing stones in her body. You know them as kidney stones, gallstones. Calculus is stone forming activity. So it's already present in her body. And gastritis, which is what? Anytime you've got an itis, it's an inflammation. Gastric means stomach, duodenal, colon, etc. So let me show you what yours would look like as I have her name covered up, okay? So let's see if you can see that. Okay? So this is an entire report that I keep for her so that if I'm doing work for her, and I'm going to kind of cover up her name again, I've got all of her nutritional elements. You can see them there. Toxic elements, ratios. It goes over her metabolic type. She's a slow number 2. So that HTMA is called a profile number 2. If you go to naturallywithkaren.com, it's all done through the mail. The only thing is you cannot order one from the state of New York. So go outside to your aunt's house or something like that and use their address outside of New York. Find a friend that maybe you can have your results, or do email results only and send me another address. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm just telling you there's a way around it. Okay. So that is $125 plus $750 shipping to ship you your hard copy patient report. And you can always inbox me and say, I don't need the shipping. And I'll give you just my PayPal direct at paypal.me/shaman. And you can just pay the $125 and we'll do email results only. Okay. So that's it for now. If you've got tingling in your hands and feet and they're falling asleep, the last point I wanted to make is what's it doing to your core processor, the brain? Okay. We don't want to fall asleep any more than we have. We don't want to have any more brain fog, which I hear from so many of my young clients in their 20s, 30s, 40s. We shouldn't be entering dementia in our 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I'm going to say so long for now. I hope this has been of value to you. I hope you learned a little bit about the falling asleep of the hands and feet, peripheral neuropathy, a little bit about some of the esotericism, or, looking into the double messages of some of the Grimm's fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty, and why I think there's a connection between your hands and sleep, falling asleep, and this falling asleep and not being able to wake up. In fact, I find it pretty strangely connected. So I'm going to say so long for now, and thank you so much for joining me. Please be sure to share this. It's going to be posted and uploaded onto my YouTube channel at Naturally with Karen. And the more that you support me, the more that I'm able to give to you. All right. Have a good evening. Sending you all love.